participants for our Leadership in Cybersecurity CISO Roundtable. Let me get them onto the stage. Hello, Jim.
Hello.
Hello, Phil. And hello, Olivia.
Hello.
How's everybody doing? So with that, as you guys know, we want to have Jim moderate a session really going through and talking about some of the challenges that CISOs are dealing with. And I'll turn it over to you, Jim.
Cool. Thank you. Real quick introduction. Name is Jim Webster. I handle federal R&D here at Scythe. But as far as this roundtable is concerned, prior to joining Scythe, I spent about 19 years at Mantic International. In the last 10, I was there as a CISO. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. And I'd like to welcome Phil and Olivia. And I'd like to give you guys a chance to introduce yourself. Phil, we'll start with you.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Phil Gardner. I'm the founder and CEO of IONS. IONS is a Boston-based business. We support practicing InfoSec of CISOs and their teams in helping them make better decisions and develop their people, save time, pay down risk, all these different things. We do it with a subscription offering.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. Olivia?
Hi, everyone. My name's Olivia. I'm so glad to be here. I forgot my unicorn paraphernalia. Do you have an extra one? Oh, fantastic. There we go.
I've got my stuff unicorn. My emotional support unicorn.
I am a two-time CISO. I've been around in cybersecurity for a long time, about 23 years. I started with Internet Security Systems, ISS back in the day. I'm also a faculty member with IONS. So Phil is dotted line, very faintly, my boss.
Very good.
If you squint, you'll see it.
Well, welcome. And yeah, you have more courage than I did. I only could do the CISO thing once, and after 10 years, that was enough. Yeah, I've always said I think that the CISO is the hardest job in the C-suite. The other ones are well defined. They have responsibility and ownership, and CISOs have lots of responsibilities but zero ownership. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and that's one of the challenges, I think, is that, a lot of what CISOs have to do is really, not only just lead by example, but have those conversations. So that's what I wanted to really get into with this, today was helping a lot of the more technical folks that are on the phone understand, the business challenges that security leadership goes through. So I want to hit a couple areas, threat landscape, but then get into leadership and how we look at risk management as well. But based on some of the conversations that we heard from Ron and Sunil early on, I was real curious to get your opinions both on how you are viewing artificial intelligence (LLMs) as both a tool to help security, but also a risk that you need to manage. So Olivia, can we start with you?
So I'm going to show my age here. I personally do not like AI at all in any shape or form. I think it's scary. I remember watching Blade Runner when I was a kid. I mean, it's that kind of scary to me. However, professionally, you can't avoid it. It is the future. It is what the Shopify CEO sent out in his memo. It is going to be replacing jobs. And so you have to figure out how your skills can fit in with AI, not how AI can fit in with your skills, because that is long gone at this point. So I think the discretionary use of company data concerns me the most with AI. Because people don't understand the concept, the idea that if they're posting something out to the world on ChatGPT, it eats your content and reuses it. So there's not a lot of understanding about that. So that's probably where I like to focus the most.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Phil, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm sitting higher. So in that, we're with approximately 900 clients. I get the chance to sort of hear in on conversations, but I'm past the technical stuff. So what I'd like to do is have Olivia take the lead on the technical side of the equation.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is sort of give an overview of, Jim, what you just described earlier, which is you just see the remit of the CISO and the team going up. And ChatGPT and AI is another great example. And so stepping back, here's what's going on, guys, is we just keep on digitalizing business processes, currency, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And when you digitalize all this stuff, there's risk associated with it. And that risk sort of floats around the businesses, and people say, who's going to own this risk? Sales doesn't want it, marketing doesn't want it, ops doesn't want it. And it shows up at this poor executive called the CISO and team. And so I'm stunned by, IONS is now a 20-plus-year-old business. We defined originally the threat vector being network security. Well, that's sort of quaint now when you think of the different things that the CISO and their teams are grappling with. And that is not going away. So at a higher level, AI is one thing, but there's going to be something next week and the next week, and it just keeps on coming because we just keep digitalizing everything.
No, agreed. And I think one of the thoughts, just from a both technical as well as just a evolution of risk management, I tend to look at AI as really it's evolutionary. So you look at, we've been dealing with robotic process automation for quite a while now. How do we help the end users automate their actions? And I sort of see there's a greater risk with it, but I see AI and LLMs as just a natural maturation of the robotic process automation of how are we dealing with that. And so the work we started doing with digital identities and digital personas, and including those in our IAM, identity and access management conversations, I see that transitioning into LLM. And so if you had to deal with RPA, then hopefully you've got the processes in place for your digital personas that help you deal with the LLMs a little better. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the ways I look at it. Mm-hmm. The other question I've got would be, so we talked AI, what other threats do you see? And so Phil, a couple things from your perspective, what are you hearing about threats? And then Olivia, I ask you what you perceive as other threats that the CISO has to have in his portfolio, her portfolio, that they need to deal with. So let's start with Olivia.
It's the unknown. There's always a little part in the back of your brain that's scratching when you're a CISO, and it's 24 hours a day. It's what do I not know? And CISOs have got to be one of the most paranoid species on the planet. If you think about it, I mean, what other group of people are that paranoid?
Oh yeah, every digital device out there is a threat vector. You're doing what with that?
But I'm. Last year, I said the same thing. This year, I'm saying the same thing. Third-party risk, fourth-party risk, fifth-party risk, and so forth. Really terrifying. It really is. It's because it really plays on that. What do I not know? Right. What's hiding out there? I have zero control, but like you said, all of the accountability. It's a beast out there. So
I agree with that.
That's really that's where I like to focus.
Yeah, Phil, what are you hearing? From people that are coming to IONS.
Yeah, no, I've been out on the road a bunch. So two things I'm hearing, and both of them make CISOs and their teams' jobs tougher. First piece is our clients are saying that they're expecting the threat picture to darken. Three reasons. Recessions tend to lead to an uptick in cybercrime. As we think about some of the actions coming out of Washington, we should expect hacktivism to pick up, not degrade. We have a bunch of people around the globe who are not happy with the U.S. right now. And that can be reflected in Canadians. And I mean, you just name just about everyone we're pissing off right
Canadians.
Now. Yeah, it's tough to piss off the Canadians, and we seem to be doing it. And then the last piece is nation states. Don't believe, people are seeing and expecting more from very sophisticated places like China, where they're just seeing more activity and they expect that to continue. So threat picture darkens. I guess the other sort of double whammy of this is an open question as to what capabilities are going to be provided by the federal government and what are not. So this is not meant to be political. It's a fact is the budgets are being cut. And so the question is, what are you going to see out of CISO? What, the the Cyber Safety Review Board is now been defunded. What are we going to see out of the ISACs? Which ones are going to survive, which are not, and what are the capabilities coming out of the ISACs? What are the capabilities? We hear about stories about brain drains at different institutions. Some of that is apocryphal, some of it's not. But I guess what our clients are all saying is, okay, these services that we expected to be of high quality and they're coming out of the federal government, the real question is whether both the quality will continue or whether they'll even be there. So sort of a double whammy where people are, freaked out would not be too strong of a term.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you're right. Because you take a lot of the CISO services in terms of the known vulnerability database, or a number of those are written into policies and procedures and into public law that you have to patch in a certain time frame. So if CISO's not going to be there doing it, or not at a high quality, it's got a downstream consequence. So yeah, I can definitely see that. Given that everything that's going on in the economy right now, in the environment right now, it really points to leadership challenges. So I'd like the next set of questions really about leadership as a CISO, and I've always found that to be like most managers, but it's even more so with the CISO, is it's really bidirectional. It's that leading down, managing down, and leading the team, but also managing up and providing that leadership to the rest of the business executives. So, Olivia, to you, in terms of twice having done this, what do you really find to be that effective or an effective leadership strategy when you do have to provide that leadership for your technical team, but then also work with your business partners in an organization and provide that cybersecurity counseling to them?
You have to learn two things. One is translate. You have to learn how to translate, which is where the soft skills come into play. You have to really understand how to translate a technical concept, a pen test finding, and translate it and map it to business drivers, or else it won't resonate with them. They won't react the way you need them to react or do the thing you want them to do. The second one is, I think it's always been really helpful that I've always been able to frame it as what it means to you. So you have to look at everybody individually. You have to look at how they learn. There's 7 or 8 ways of learning. How do they best intake information? Are they an introvert or extrovert? What are the pressures they have every day as part of their job? And then you have to frame your ask or your tell in such a way that it hits all those items. So it really comes across as customized to that person. And that is how you efficiently can not only talk to technical folks, but also to your partners and to executives and make sure everybody's on the same page. But it takes a lot of work. You have to spend the time and effort in reaching out individually a lot of the times. And that's one of the interesting things about the CISO role, is that I can't think of many other positions where you literally have to translate like that, and you have to approach everybody as an individual and make sure the message resonates with them.
Yeah, I always had a communications plan that had, what were those talking points, the key concepts that I wanted to promote, to make sure that I was, through repetition. It was just one of the ways that you can bring people on board. It also helps the team below know that these are our valuable and equities, were the things that we really want to put our weight behind and make sure the organization understands how those benefit the company. Phil, I'm really interested with your background in the Air Force, as well as a lot of CISOs coming to you for advice and leadership. What questions are you getting now in terms of how people are looking to shape their organizations, and also work with boards and work with the rest of the C-suite?
Yeah, no, I noticed the F-16. Is that an F-16 over your head?
Yeah, it is. My next door neighbor was in charge of the South Carolina Air National Guard, and so flew F-16s, and so he had one of his tech sergeants make that for me with my name on the cockpit.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I was actually I was a naval aviator, but
okay.
We're the thinner capitalized group of aviators. So I totally agree with Olivia. What I'm struck by, again, and this is a decades-long challenge for InfoSec, is it's a little like the Charlie Brown conversation. When the CISOs often speak at the C-suite, what they hear is the teacher and the Charlie Brown going walk, 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 and they just don't understand.
Yeah. Glazed look on their faces. Yeah.
And that is a place that we as InfoSec just have to improve. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, because yes, the board is deeply interested, and I'll give you some examples of how they've existentially they view cyber challenges, but they're not technologists, and you won't make them into technologists.
Right.
And so the security team has to both figure out ways of telling their story, but also much more importantly, I think, is understanding what drives the business and how they can link their activities to specifically what's driving the business, not generically, specifically. Mm-hmm. So understanding, and by the way, this sounds easy. This is stunningly hard. Mm-hmm. But as you think of what Lockheed Martin is trying to do, understanding what Lockheed Martin specifically is trying to do over the next 3 to 5 years, and then be able to link the InfoSec initiatives to support the next gen of that aircraft, or cost reduction, or selling to Ireland, or whatever it happens to be, at that level of specificity. And so what that requires is two things that the CISO and team are not particularly comfortable with, is getting outside of InfoSec and talking with business executives at a really deep level, and then adapting their program so they're talking in business terms as opposed to talking in technical terms. Because candidly, often when the CISO shows up in the board, because I'll talk to board members about it, it's a pro forma exercise. They come in, they talk, they ask a couple questions, it's 25 minutes, and then they're done. And that's not where we need to be. It's too important.
Correct. Yeah. Go ahead, Olivia.
I have a way of doing this, and I'm going to cut it very, very short because or else I could take up the entire time. So if you look at a manufacturing organization, what do they care about the most in general? They care about uptime. I mean, any kind of downtime is going to be very detrimental. Delivery, the last mile, getting the product into the hands of the consumers, things like that. So if you look at the drivers for the industry as a whole, and then you take each one and you go, what would happen, or what would be the cost if we went down for 30 minutes, X amount of dollars? Then you take that and make a story from that saying, well, the security controls we have in place will effectively inhibit any chance of that happening. Of course, you can't say that, with 100% certainty, but, fairly. And then you can say, and that means it's saving the customers, saving the company X amount of dollars, which is the cost of the downtime. So that's just a simple example about how you work the story through to security is the savior of the day, as opposed to security is just a cost center, a money pit.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned story, because that leads me to another one of the questions that I wanted us to talk about, because I find myself doing this a lot, and that is really cultural awareness. And by that, I mean, not just everything that's in the news, but just security culture. As a CISO, again, you look at other groups, maybe the chief human resource officer, there really isn't another, C-suite person that is trying to affect, cultural awareness across an organization. So a question I've got is, what effective tools have you seen CISOs or security leaders use to really drive that security awareness or to improve awareness, across an organization?
It ain't phishing tests, I can tell you that.
No, you want to piss people off? Yes, yeah. I've had so many arguments with compliance personnel about the negative aspects of a phishing test, but they still put them on the list.
And they report on the results every month.
I had a CEO that wanted to fire people after 3 failures. And I had to personally sit down with them, and I crafted a couple of phishing examples, and I said, look, I know enough to make sure you will click on any phishing test I give you. So you cannot if you want to make this, a punishable offense, people are not going to, participate, and they're going to rebel against it in lots of ways. And, one of the ways I've seen it, I saw it in a different organization, is it was implemented. And basically people were just like, this is a fish. I'm going to report every email I get to the SOC and make them go through all of these things.
Yeah. Or they're not going to click on any emails at all.
Right.
They'll just stop working. So it's one or the other.
Correct. Yeah. So what other than keeping phishing aside, what types of training or security awareness events have you seen that did get traction and were effective?
I've seen, and this is an off the wall concept. Is I personally don't believe security awareness training programs work. I don't see the platforms working. This is my personal experience. But what I have seen working is when an organization has a CISO who they really admire, they really look up to this person, and this person is involved with different committees and groups and different diversity even, and doing mentoring and things like that within the organization. Employees then tend to think 1 second more, which is what you need, 1 second more before clicking on that link. Or they think before they share and give permissions to a document. Or they consider different factors, or maybe they report things. I think a lot of it has to do with the respect that the CISO has gathered within the organization, and how integrated that CISO is, or security leader, within the organization as well, and how well known they are. That I see as successful.
Agreed. Once a year in October, making people sit through a 60-minute video.
More terrified I'm going to fail this.
And have to do it again and lose 2 hours of your life, right? So just 1 hour. But Phil, people must be coming to ask you guys all the time, how do they improve security awareness training?
Yeah, so I'm going to defer to Olivia here. She's the one. Okay. She's the expert here. But I am going to talk about communicating the program to the executive suite.
Okay.
Because I think we as an industry, do a really poor job of it. And what we sort of preach is this idea of long arc and short arc communications. And I had a board member once say to me, every time the C-suite comes to me, they have a different topic they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly disorienting because we're not technical people. So it was a she said, it's the equivalent of one time they're speaking French, and then I have to learn German, and then I have to learn Dutch, and then I have to learn Spanish. Because it's just like, and I can't keep track. It's just these shards of information that I don't really appreciate. I think one of the things we have to get much better at is what we call long arc communication, which is there's always a standard message. Where's the 5-year plan for this program? And what are we trying to do, and what are we trying to accomplish? And then any new thing you bring in needs to be tucked under that, and how that fits into the long arc. And so it's sort of just narrative more than anything, but understanding what is the value of this program, and then how do these individual pieces, whether it be zero trust or whether it be MDM or whatever it happens to be, give the narrative of how zero trust is actually going to support and bolster what you're doing from a long arc perspective. It's just way easier for them to understand. So you're just, back to my silly analogy, you're speaking one language and you're not flipping on them all the time.
Yeah, again, you're trying to get that what's that thematic element, and you're right, it's not something that changes every quarter. You want, if you're only, because typically when I was briefing the board, it's once a quarter. So, and you're right, I had my obligatory somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes in front of the board, and so I had the consistent theme. This is they heard me say the same thing 4 times a year because I wanted to drive that point home and make sure that they were behind what we were trying to do.
There you go.
I always say, if you want to know what the board is going to ask you, get a week's worth of USA Today newspapers and read the front page, because that is what they're going to ask you about.
100%. Actually, I wrote that down because Ian was talking about, I used to call it, Mantech was up in the DC area. So I used to call it, security alerts by WTOP, because my CEO would listen to WTOP on the drive-in. And so I started listening to it too, because if there was a security story, I knew I was going to get a phone call and say, are we secure about this? So that is 100%. So one of the things I did want to ask, and Phil, you do have to answer this one. How do you answer that question when business leadership asks you as a CISO or the security leader in the organization, are we secure? I would always, I'm going to tell you what my answer was. I would either say, as far as we know, because Kevin was pissing me off because he kept asking that. So I would say, as far as we know, or in regards to give me a specific, then I can tell you if we're secure. And so I'm just curious, how would you recommend if somebody, a CISO, should answer that question if a leader comes to them and says, "Are we secure?"
The answer is absolutely not, because there's no way to be secure. I mean, again, it depends who's knocking on your door. I mean,
Right.
if sophisticated folks are interested in getting into your network, they will. So it's, I mean, are we adequately spending the capital you've given me to reach a level of defense? Yes. But it's all a continuum. It's just, that's, this idea of binary is just,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense.
Olivia, your thoughts?
From what perspective?
Well, you've been there. You've had leaders come to you and say, "Are we secure?"
Everyone has their own definition of what secure means. That's how I usually approach it. And I say, my definition is nothing, is exactly what Phil just said.
Right.
But your definition might be different, but my professional definition is exactly what Phil just said. You can't ever be 100% secure.
No, and I agree. And that's the advice I've given other CISOs and security leaders. You have to reframe the question. Is that it comes from it's easy to discount it, but it comes from a valid point. There is concern by business leadership, and so the idea then is pull the threads and find out what that concern is, and then hopefully provide the answer. Next topic I want to pivot to is one that I've always, as a CISO, and just working with just background. I came up through IT. I was a network manager. I was a programmer, and so I came from the technical side of the house, not the business side of the house. So I always, and I was one of those guys that said compliance never equals security. But as I got to be, more into leadership and became a CISO, it was like, no, I realized that compliance and security were highly related. But I always had that conversation with my technical staff that didn't want to, that if once something was tagged as compliance, it was irrelevant or it wasn't effective. So Olivia, I'm curious, how do you deal with, when you talk to security teams, that tension between security and compliance?
There shouldn't be tension. I've never personally experienced tension between security and compliance, because compliance is the velvet hammer. When nothing else works, when you're done talking and even legal can't get your point across and they're supporting you on something, then you can always trot in compliance and say, this is something we have to do for SOC 2. Oh, well, isn't that terrible? So I always went that approach. I think security and engineering tend to not play well in the same sandbox.
Right. Yeah, and that's when security gets the reputation of being the Department of No, and trying to either stop or change things, which is at least what I found with, and why the engineering teams didn't like, security, is because, we're there to find fault and find risk, and engineers just want to go build things and make it go fast.
Well, but also security is very pesky and very reactive compared to engineering. Engineering plans things out, but what does security do? Get a pen test, and 2 days later start sending over criticals and highs saying you need to fix these within within a month or whatever, 30 days, whatever your timeline is. So that's annoying. I mean, here comes security trying to push their way onto your roadmap that you had all nicely put out and scheduled for the next year and a half. And here comes security saying, I need these fixed within 30 days. That can get a little tedious if you're engineering.
Well, in particular, like you said, engineering, the business is in the business to do something, to produce, a widget or provide a service. And engineering's got a service delivery schedule where they're trying to provide something to business. And then here comes security, upsetting their schedule for what they see as, maybe not a great reason. So
and so then you got to go through the exercise of translation and explaining why it's important to fix the critical and highs. And of course, they're not going to take you seriously until you align it with the business.
Right. Have you seen success in other areas where, because one of the things, the way I tried to deal with that is I made sure that, and I was able to get the backing of the CEO and the CIO, that security had a seat at the table early on in all major projects. So we had a a tiered system. So anything that had a certain level of funding, security had to be involved from the beginning, so that we didn't get those surprises that, oh, we're going to deploy this on Friday afternoon. I hope it's secure, and then we have to scramble. We were there from the beginning. Have you seen in your experience that security does get that seat at the table with engineering?
Security is like that little brother who always wants to get invited to the party, and drink the beer with the older siblings.
Unless until mom says that you've got to take your little brother with you, it doesn't usually happen. Right.
So mom says you have to take your little brother with you and bring him to the party, but you really don't want to. So you should be inviting him to the party, but you really don't want to. And I think that's really what I see the most is, yes, it's on paper, it's a process and a policy, but does it actually happen in real life? In my experience, more times it often doesn't, but I also haven't really experienced security getting added at the very tail end and being the blocker. Security has always been invited kind of to the party around the middle when everything's been planned already. But they're able to bring streamers and balloons.
Yeah, they get to put the wrapper on it and say, yeah, security's looked at it so that when it goes to the board or goes to leadership, then engineering can say, yeah, look, we brought them along and we got them to agree to it.
We played nice. We did what we were supposed to do.
Very true. And that leads me into organizations go through various ways of managing risk and trying to understand risk. And one of the things I always tried to tell my team is that security doesn't own risk. We advise the company on risk and potential risk avoidance. What have you seen as a good or a workable strategy to, again, let the technical folks in the security team know that they can't stop everything, and then also communicating that risk and the risk acceptance to leadership?
Olivia, you want to take that one?
Yep.
What was the question in that?
So the question in there is I was
hoping Phil would answer.
It's really about communicating risk, because I've worked with a lot of security engineers that look, and Phil mentioned this earlier, that see risk as binary. There's either some risk or no risk. I've got to put this in place, and I've got to eliminate all risk in a system, as opposed to, I've always looked at it as it's a spectrum, and it's based on a business decision of how much risk does the business want to accept. And I found that, at least in my experience, was very difficult to bridge that gap between the technical team that saw it as binary and business that wanted security somewhat out of the risk business, unless, like you said, it was compliance. So I was just curious, in risk communication, what have you found in the past that was effective at communicating risk to the board or to leadership, but also gave you a way to talk to the security staff about risk? So is there any particular methodology or thing that was successful for you in the past?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, honestly. Just you align it with what's important to the business. And the very last thing I try to frame risk as, and it's ironic, is that an initiative will reduce risk. That's the very last way I describe it. I talk to initiatives, planned initiatives, in relation to growing the business, customer satisfaction, expanding internationally, reducing internal costs. That's how I always present the risk. I apply it to those. And at the very tail end, if none of those can work, then I say, and it's going to reduce risk.
So it's more in terms of what's the business benefit, to the initiative, as opposed to, there's a certain amount of cyber risk or operations risk, with
right. So you spin it from risk, which is not a nice word, but you spin it to, hey, look, doing it actually creates opportunity for these things that you care about.
And Jim, I would add there, I think the real thing that we as an InfoSec industry need to get better at is developing our direct reports, because the CISOs can sometimes do that. The directs are not good at that. And so again, because the CISO can't, especially as the organizations get big, you see these CISOs are sort of run ragged because candidly, they don't feel confident in having their directs go off and have business meetings. And so what ends up happening is their calendars are triple stacked because they're off doing all this stuff. Whereas they really need their deputies off having those conversations with different people, but that's just not what their deputies are capable of doing yet. And that is clearly a place that we need to get better.
Right, because typically the deputy is going to be more, at least in my experience, functionally aligned. They've got a technical, it's the network security person or the EDR or incident response.
Yeah, but they got to be able to walk in the moccasins of the other person across the table. And we train for technical acumen and a whole bunch of stuff. But that's one of the things business acumen and sort of EQ skills is a place that we just need to keep working on.
Yeah, it says soft skills. Agreed that how do we improve the soft skills in the not only just security, but I think it's IT in general probably has that as an issue. Another area that we talked about just in terms of the are we secure question. So when it comes to budget, so we've already talked about not using risk or only using risk and compliance as sort of a last element of trying to get something approved. But what have you seen that's effective in terms of way of communicating those asks to management that you do need additional budget for a security concern that you have out there, whether it be people are moving to the cloud, so now I've got cloud security posture management, and that's going to cost me more, or we're bigger, so I've got more events, so my SIM costs have gone up. Explaining those budget impacts to an organization, at least to me, I always got caught up in the technical details, and it was difficult to get back into here's the business aspect of the budget ask, and trying to get those things approved was always hard for me. So if you developed or seen any strategies that were effective for security teams to make those budget requests?
Jim, I think you answered your question, which is the ones who are really doing it well are talking about how they're going to make the business go faster or be more successful or grow enterprise value. And super hard to do, but the ones who do it really well are able to link their programs into what matters. And when they do, or a big initiative that InfoSec is a critical part of, and to do that, so we need to do zero trust because zero trust is really cool, as opposed to we need to do zero trust because it's going to allow us to, and it's part of a larger initiative. Those are always the more successful conversations. But again, here's the other piece is, the C-suite gets it. I mean, these folks are really smart. So they understand how, they know that the business is getting digitalized. So often we just need to talk about and educate them like, e-commerce happens because of InfoSec. And I don't think we do a very good job of sort of broader, digital transformations. The foundation of all of that is security. It doesn't happen without it. So and you talk to smart executives, which I talk to, they appreciate that toll. They're just wanting to know, does this make sense? And, this is getting really expensive is what they keep saying to me.
Right.
And I absolutely agree with that. And I think that what's always worked for me is I don't go in there with my security hat on. I go in there with I support everybody. I love everybody here. Let me just help you enable the business. That hat on. If you go in with your security hat, they're going to put you in a corner and restrict you to talking just about technical stuff. And you don't want to be put into that corner. Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I found is that when I could get the conversation to either about a service delivery or about customer trust, those conversations were much more successful. And it helped being in with a defense contractor because there were all sort of hoops that we had to go through with different customers, and being able to show they could come to the table, with a VP or with a project manager and provide him the tools he needed to gain that customer's trust was always very helpful. Last question I have, we've got like 5 minutes left, and I don't know if we have any questions. I'll check with Mark in a second. But we talked a little bit about AI, but what other technologies do you think are going to have the biggest impact on security in the next 1 to 2 years?
AI. No, and the reason AI being put into tools that aren't working so well right now. Things like those awful assessment questionnaires that you have to fill out.
Third-party risk management.
Third-party risk management. I mean, the beauty of AI, there's so much opportunity there. I really see AI just getting put into every single little thing you can think of. Even Notion has AI right now. I have no idea why, but
Zoom does. Every web collaboration tool has an AI note-taking component.
Yeah.
So, Jim, we do have some good questions. Let me just pop them up on the screen. We can go through them real quick. It's interesting, Olivia, you were just talking about AI being everywhere, because this question is great. Who owns the risk when AI-enabled tools make decisions or inadvertently leak sensitive information?
There's no way to be inadvertent about leaking sensitive information. You either do it or you don't. I mean,
it was put into, somebody put it into the LLM, either by policy or against policy, and that's where the,
so how do you guys, how do you see this? Both from the C-suite, Phil, and from the CISO perspective, who has to own the risk? Let's say IT is bringing in some new tools, and those tools, the next version's got AI integrated. We saw this with Microsoft Copilot, right? All of a sudden, Copilot was scanning a bunch of Microsoft assets that weren't expected. So who owns that risk?
I think the business owner, the stakeholder, the person who wanted to bring it in, owns the risk. But they can only own the risk if the risks are truly explained to them, and the caveats and the rules of, okay, you want this tool, you want AI in this platform, these are the rules.
Yeah, the issue, the problem with that is, I agree with you in concept. The problem is that what happens is, Copilot's a great example, all this unstructured data flying all over the organization. So what happens is you ask a query, and you get, the CEO's equity package comes back in your response. And inevitably they show up at the CISO's doorstep, because that's the only executive who's capable of fielding this thing. So, that's sort of where we are. It gets cross-functional real fast, it gets complex real fast. And so the default is, there's another task that gets stacked outside the doorstep of the CISO.
Yeah, I think Mark's, like we were talking risk earlier, the business owns the risk, but the CISO or the security suite team owns the responsibility to communicate that risk to business, so they can make an informed decision. Security doesn't have to like it, but they just have to make sure business knows what to do when they decide to turn Copilot on, when they decide to open up ChatGPT for everybody in the organization, that these are the risks, and they're willing to accept that, to get those productivity gains.
Yeah. Here's another one. How do CEOs connect cybersecurity investments to operational continuity, business value, and long-term risk management?
Poorly. No, I think that, at least in my experience, I think it really was, like Olivia said, you've got to tie those investments back to a line of business, or an offering that we're doing this because we decided to go to work for the federal government, so we need to be CMMC compliant. And these are the investments we need to make. If the business has decided that this compliance framework, whether it's CMMC, ISO 27000, SOC 2, is important to securing business, then here's the cost associated with that.
Not to be a smartass, but I sort of take issue with the question. I don't think it's the CEO's job to do that connection. I don't think the CEO is capable.
I was wondering that too. Yeah.
Like the CISO, that's why the CISO gets the big bucks. That's their job, is to connect. The CEO is never going to be a cybersecurity expert, nor should he or she. They've got other things. They got a different job. So this is exactly what the CISO is tasked to do.
Yeah, I think the CEO should be CISO. I think that's a mistake, a typo.
Yeah, I think maybe the context was they were saying, if the CEO is looking at budget, how do they determine where they draw the line? Because the CISO is going to ask for more than you're going to probably give them. So how do they make that correlation?
Well, it helps if you've had a very minor breach. Never let a good breach go to waste. But if you haven't had that, and you're probably lucky if you haven't had that, again, it's what we've been saying through this whole session is you have to turn it into an enabler.
Yeah.
And there are 6. So everything that you want, you have to align with one of 6 business drivers. And those are what the CEO wakes up in the morning and what they're happy about, what makes them happy. Reducing risk. Sorry, not that one should be last, I should say. Increasing revenue makes them very happy. How does what you're about to do increase risk for the company? Sorry, increase revenue. I keep messing up that word. Increase revenue for the company. How does it decrease costs for the company? How does it improve internal efficiencies for the company? How does it help them grow globally? And how do they keep customers? How does it help them keep customers happy and repeat customers so they tell their friends? And the very final one, the very one that you should only use if you have to, is reduce risk. That is how a CEO can actually talk about why they want to spend X amount of money on a outsourcing or whatever, moving to the cloud, is because the CISO has to connect the dots.
Correct.
And so the CEO can then understand in their brain, in their world, because they think of the world in those 6 ways, 6 drivers. Now they understand why they're being asked to put forward this money.
Okay, well, those were the key questions that came up. I don't know if there's any, I didn't see anything else, but we certainly appreciate the time, Olivia and Phil and Jim.
Thank you guys very much.
Yes,
Thank you guys. This was great. Appreciate this. Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay. Take care.